Hey guys, it's Nick. My last video was about the Russian conflict and if Russian stocks were cheap at the time. This was before the invasion, and obviously a lot has happened since then. In this video, I want to talk about the sanctions on Russia, including kicking them out of SWIFT, and are these sanctions going to really slow Russia down, or will they have the effect of taking down the economies of the US and Europe as well? And lastly, I'm going to talk about Russian stocks. If I liked the prices before the invasion, I must love them now when they are 90% lower, right? Well, stay tuned because I will outline the various risks involved in owning these stocks now. So let's start with the attention-grabbing headline first. They're saying Russian banks are being kicked out of SWIFT, and this is the Belgian-based messaging system that banks use. Now, this implies that Russia cannot transact with any banks outside of Russia. If you read the fine print, though, the two banks that receive the majority of energy revenues, Sberbank and Gazprom Bank, are not blocked from SWIFT. So, are the Western governments stupid and did not know that? Of course not. They still need Russian natural gas and oil in Europe and Russian oil in the US. So not only are the US and Europe continuing to buy Russian energy because they have no choice, but Russia is still pumping natural gas and oil through Ukrainian pipelines, and Ukraine is still transiting this energy to Europe, and neither Russia nor Ukraine has sabotaged or damaged these pipelines. Strange, isn't it? Well, not really. Let's take a quick look at the pipelines between Russia and Europe. So natural gas pipelines are dark blue and oil pipelines are light blue, and there are both of them crisscrossing through Ukraine into Western Europe. And here is the Nord Stream 1 pipeline that was built to go around Ukraine, and it goes directly into Germany. And the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which the US is trying to stop from being operational, runs along the same route as the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. And so just a quick look, you see that Ukraine transits about 22% of Russian natural gas flows to Europe. And so the other almost 3/4 does not go through Ukraine. It goes through Nord Stream 1 and the Yamal pipeline. So can Europe and the US boycott Russian energy? The short answer is no. Germany imports 90% of their energy, and Europe imports 40% of their natural gas from Russia and 25% of their crude oil from Russia. So let's just look at the crude oil portion of it, because that's what the US imports from Russia still. As of the other day, it was about 650,000 barrels a day. What would happen if Russian crude oil was taken off the market? So the world crude oil use per day is about 96.5 million barrels. And of those barrels, about 35 to 50 million barrels are exported from one country to another country. So Russia makes up about 5 million of those exported barrels per day, which means Russia supplies roughly 10% of the daily crude oil exports used in the world. So what would happen if Russia's 5 million barrels of crude oil went off the market? Well, the CEO of Pioneer in the US said that would send oil to $200 a barrel. The CEO of Pioneer Resources says the only way to stop Putin is to ban oil and gas exports. But if the Western world announced that we're going to ban Russian oil and gas, oil is going to $200 a barrel probably. 150 to 200 easy. And he also said that the US would be unable to replace crude supplies from Russia this year, even as he backed calls for a global embargo on its energy exports. I'm talking about a 2 to 3 year plan, because US shale, even if somebody adds a drilling rig, it takes 6 to 8 months to get first production. There's labor shortages, there's frac fleet shortages, there's rig shortages, and there's even sand shortages. So if an energy price shock happens, we will get an even bigger jump in inflation. The world will go into a recession or worse. Interest rates will have to jump much higher, which will kill growth and the housing market. Not only that, but the Fed has been dragging their feet on raising interest rates while inflation is at least 7%. What happens to the interest the government must pay on its almost $30 trillion in debt for every 1% increase in the interest paid on that debt? Let's take a look. So the US debt is $28.4 trillion as of July 2021. US GDP is $22.4 trillion in 2021, and the government's revenue from our GDP is about $4 trillion, or about 18% of GDP. But our government spending was $6.8 trillion in 2021, so about a $2.7 trillion deficit. At our current debt level, the yearly interest on the debt that we have is $562 billion. Now, the interest rate on this debt is 1.5%, which implies that it is shorter term debt that has to be continuously paid off and reissued all the time. And so for every 1% increase in interest rate on the debt that we pay equals $284 billion more in yearly interest, or about 7% of current government revenue. So if interest rates rose about 4 percentage points, that would add another 4 times 284 billion, so about $1 trillion in addition to this $562 billion in interest payments. Take that away from the 4 trillion that they get in taxes, and that's about 33% of what the government gets from taxes. That is a big chunk. So although the Western governments may be able to hurt Russia financially in the short and medium term, there is a real chance that this can hurt us as much or even more. As for Russian stocks, yeah, I thought they were cheap before the invasion, and I bought all the stocks I mentioned in the previous video. Obviously, I got my head handed to me within a few days, and I sold them out as they gapped down way past the mental stops I had for them. So if I liked them before the invasion, I must love them at a 90% discount, right? No. For one, I took a big loss, and so I am personally going to stay away from them. But even if you did not buy any before and you are now looking at them as screaming buys, should you buy them? Well, the nickel, oil, and gas in the ground that these companies own is not going away. Sberbank is not closing its doors, most likely, but that does not mean that you will be able to buy them, since one, they are halted on the exchanges, and more importantly, there is a real risk that even if you are able to buy, say, the RSX ETF, the ETF may get delisted or banned by the US and force a sale at these low prices. Or, as payback for sanctions, Russia can nationalize these companies or do something where you no longer own what you thought you did. So remember, this is not financial advice to buy or sell any of these stocks. Do your own research. But if you are still thinking of buying, be aware that there is now a real risk of losing your whole investment. And that brings me to Chinese stocks. Seeing this coordinated scorched earth against Russia's economy should make people think twice about Chinese stocks. If China gets any ideas of invading Taiwan or helping Russia too much, their stocks may get the same type of treatment that Russia did. It seems everyone is losing in this war. Let's hope it ends before there is any more loss of life and disruption of millions of lives. Until then, be aware of the effects that this is having on the whole world and try to get prepared for much tougher times. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.